Here, and today I want to talk about the topic of FUD, otherwise known as fear, uncertainty, and doubt, and why it is important to understand the different types of FUD. So, FUD is essentially putting out a statement or spreading news or putting out a warning that has negative sentiment. And this could be unintentional form of FUD, so just out of ignorance, just an opinion, or it could be intentional FUD, which is basically having a darker side to it, some agenda. It could arise from someone or institution missing out on the train, seeing the financial asset price rocket and not being part of it. So what they want to do is crash the price by putting out false information or uncertain information, crashing the price, um, making that entry into that trade, and therefore profiting from the misalignment of price that FUD has created, and therefore returning back to the price that it's at. And you can see that happen in some instances where news comes out, price crashes, and then it rebounds a few days after. So I think it's very important to be aware of FUD and the different forms of FUD. And quite often it arises because someone has missed a train and they are emotional as a result of that. And therefore they go through these means of price manipulation, essentially. And extending to that, FUD is really taking advantage of weak minds or weak hands to sell. So if you're someone who doesn't really understand the fundamentals of, say, Bitcoin and really believes in it and understands the risks to it and the considerations already, then it's quite likely you will be affected by FUD very easily. And therefore you sell on the bad news, and then a few days later you see, oh, what you sold is now up. So you sold for no reason. So that's why it's so important to have a strong mindset, know the fundamentals, and believe in the fundamentals. If you don't truly believe it, then you're going to get wiped out. So FUD in the long run is just irrelevant. It's just a short-term blip. That is the important point. Now, anyone who's worked in stock markets or even academia in knowing economics of efficient market hypothesis knows how much importance information is to the price of a financial asset. And they know that information is reflected in the price. And if there's bad information that is running around, then that is reflected in the price. And traders also know how sensitive putting out news or bad news or false news can be on an asset price. So if you think about, the certain individuals out there that put out FUD, think about, is what they're saying ignorance? Is what they're saying really what they believe? Is their background, does it have a sound fundamental knowledge of economics and how market forces work? And then you make that judgment, because I've seen that there are educated people out there saying very uneducated things. And that's where you need to be very careful. Now, let's go through a few examples just to make you aware, and you can make a judgment of whether it's unintentional or intentional FUD. So Jamie Dimon very famously said in 2017, who is the CEO of JP Morgan, Bitcoin is just not a real thing. It will eventually be closed. Eventually, it will blow up. It is fraud. Those are very, very strong statements and words. And I think for someone who is the CEO of one of the biggest banks in the world to say that is just grossly irresponsible, very irresponsible, because what he says is of sensitive nature because of the position of power he is in. Now, to say it would be closed, that's not true. unless every government across the world agrees with that, Bitcoin will not be closed because companies, exchanges, customers, they will just move to a different country and that country will benefit from it. So governments will have to be very careful on banning Bitcoin because they would just lose out unless that government has an agenda to start mining Bitcoin themselves, which we have seen a few cases of. It will eventually blow up. It is fraud. Well, if it is going to blow up, if it is fraud, companies like Tesla, MicroStrategy, Mass Mutual, they would not put their assets in Bitcoin. They would not get shareholder or board level approval if it's going to blow up. They would not put billions or millions into Bitcoin if they believe it will blow up. So what is funny is the year after Jamie Dimon said that, he has engagements with Coinbase Exchange, and JP Morgan also has exposure indirectly to cryptocurrency just only the year after. And now this year in 2021, they're predicting 140K price in Bitcoin. How times have changed. And it really begs the question for someone to be so educated and so powerful to say something so controversial and knowing that it will crash the price. You have to make that judgment. Secondly, central banks. Now, central banks will never, or in most cases, will not be in favor of Bitcoin because it is a threat to the monetary control that they have. If all the cash and fiat goes into, say, stable coins and Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, that means there's less money flowing around that they have control of at the moment. At the moment, they are building their digital currencies, but they do not have control of blockchain or participation of blockchain at current. Although there are some banks that are getting the license to it and be able to participate in the blockchain. But at the moment, central banks do not have 100% control or any control of money that is not within their financial system and in a different ecosystem that is blockchain. And that is a threat to them because we've seen in this crisis, they want to be able to issue, a reliefs, quantitative easing, and be able to control money through interest rates and incentivize people through interest rates. And the more money that goes out of the traditional fiat system, the less control they will have. So, of course, central banks in most cases will be against Bitcoin until they properly understand it. It is essentially a threat to them. And one of the most common FUDs that they always come up with is illicit activities, saying Bitcoin is for illicit activities and for criminal activities. Now, you can tell just by that reason, it is such an ignorant thing to say because most of the illegal activities already happens with cash. Money laundering, paying cash for drugs is already happening. The majority of US banknotes actually has traces of cocaine on. It's already caught, red-handed. That form of transaction already happens on everyday fiat, central bank issued fiat. It already happens. Bitcoin is just another form of medium. There will always be some form of medium of exchange for illicit activities. And the funny thing is, Bitcoin is not even the best crypto to do that. It is such a bad crypto to do that because there's a public ledger and there's exchanges that are working with regulators that have know your customer details, so they can track down where the transaction is going and coming from. There are other cryptocurrencies, what they call privacy coins, such as Monero, which is just infinitely better at doing these sort of things. So the fact that the central banks have given statement that Bitcoin is bad for illicit activities is probably such a pathetic attempt to give a negative reason for something that is such revolutionary in technology. You know, criminal activity should not stop a great piece of technology or blockchain. What should happen is central banks, or rather governments, they themselves should be putting a better effort into stopping criminals at the source, not stopping what is a great piece of technology just because it's just another medium. And don't forget, criminal activities or money laundering or trafficking has been happening with normal money for hundreds of years, well, hundreds or maybe, hundreds of years now. It already happens on their hands. Think of it that way. Thirdly, Bill Gates. So in 2018, he said if he could short Bitcoin, he would do it. But last week, February 2021, he says now he has a neutral stance. In this case, I think it's more of, a change of opinion, and you have to respect that. He's seen Bitcoin change from something that was pretty wild west in 2017, 2018 to something that now has substance. Whether he capitalized on saying that, I'm not too sure he did, because um, it was just a question that was asked to him. It wasn't like he purposely, actively, on numerous occasions, put out negative information on Bitcoin. So I don't think so in that case. Another one, Warren Buffett. He famously called Bitcoin rat poison squared. Now, those are very, very strong words. I can understand, if he just says it's not for him, or because of this or that, it's not, a traditional asset that he's familiar with. Fair enough, but rat poison squared sounds like it's coming from an emotional perspective, and maybe because he's traditional. This guy, he's a traditional investor, and times are changing, and maybe he does not like it, and maybe he does not understand it, and maybe he does not have the time in this point in his life to really appreciate it. So maybe that's why he's come out with such strong words, because he maybe times are moving and he's not moving. And another one is CNBC. So Andrew Ross Sorkin, I had to give him a special mention because this guy, he is so bitter with Bitcoin that he missed out on Bitcoin. Everything he says is so negative, and you can see it in his eyes and his tone. And literally every interview, he it's a negative sentiment. So watch out for this guy, because he does a lot of interviews on Bitcoin, and you can see that he missed the boat. And the other thing is the Bitcoin double spend. So there's always some FUD to Bitcoin, and they'll always try and come up with new ones or even recycle old ones. And this one is the Bitcoin double spend. And you can see, if you do your research on that, that is just FUD. There's no substance to it. So I think, yeah, have a think of who is saying it, what their background is, what their agenda could be, and how much they're pushing it, or whether they were just asked an opinion, and how actively, are they pushing for it without being asked for an opinion, and just, by themselves putting it out there actively, and what their agenda could be. On the flip side, be aware of too much positive news and FOMO, because um, there's an underlying true value, and there can be short-term upsides or downsides that are not justified 100%. So, on the flip side to FUD, be aware of the FOMO, and don't be caught out on buying at the top at the same time.